Welcome, Christiana, to Differently.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have this conversation. So, we met in the podcast Collab Club, and I instantly knew, like, oh, this is a great fit. And I would love to have you on our show and share you with our listeners. And I immediately noticed that we share some passion around just helping people build a life and a business or work or career, whatever that is, without having sort of one take over the other and figuring out a way to blend the two together. So I would love to start with your journey. Like, how did that become a passion of yours? I know for me, it came from a lack of that and a desire for something more. So I'd love to hear your how that's happened for you.
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. So I went kind of the traditional route of going to university, but I was always passionate about studying abroad and decided to go to the United States and earn my PhD, and then went into academia after my PhD. I'm teaching innovation, entrepreneurship, and marketing. And when you teach classes like that, your main goal is really to inspire others to start their business, to innovate something that will help out some other entrepreneurs. And as I was doing that, I realized that my own life is really full of ideas and innovations and a lot of knowledge that I'm sharing in the classroom, but I could still share with students after they graduate or even solopreneurs that I meet on social media or in other places in the world, and decided then that my in-classroom experience helps the students get to that first stage in their life, starting their first business, maybe even experiencing the first failure. And that my business is really for solopreneurs, mainly female entrepreneurs that are maybe through those first stages, have already a family, maybe our moms with children, and trying to then get that business after the first or second failure still going, because that's really what it's all about, pushing through these failures. So my coaching business came from an extension of my academic training and making sure that we help those entrepreneurs getting back up and keep going with their amazing ideas.
Did you see that coming? Did you expect that you would be an entrepreneur?
Well, I think I've always had a lot of entrepreneurial ideas. The main thing that I saw coming, to really answer your question, was that I always enjoyed interacting with people. So I knew I wanted to help in some regards. Everybody that works as a teacher has that passion of communication, of elevating somebody else's knowledge. So I knew that. I just didn't really know that it would be more in the sense of, let me help you grow your business and your sales.
So give us a sense when you started your business, where were you in your family life? Were your kids very young? Was it before kids?
It actually started when I experienced a lot of health issues myself. And that sometimes happens when, I know this sounds really funny, like we do things in a certain way, nearly like you're driving a car and you just don't worry about filling up the tank of your car. You just drive it, and then all of a sudden you look at the fuel tank, you're like, uh-oh, it's like getting awfully low, maybe I should pull over and fill it up or something like that. So when you add children to your already very stretched thin life, whether you're going through graduate school or establishing a home or anything, all of a sudden that fuel tank goes down much faster. It's like already stretched thin, and now you're adding family to the mix. And maybe you're even, adding activities that you're starting as a family to the mix, which even though they are leisure, they're still adding calendar entries. So I think that for me, the break point really came when I realized, if I keep going like that, I'm probably going to come to the point of complete burnout. So I really need to do something differently to tie in the name of the podcast. I need to figure out how I can arrange all these different activities and fill my cup or my fuel tank in a way that I can keep going, right? I can still drive my car, but I just need to maybe pull over more often, because I know that everything is there for a reason and I don't want to let go necessarily, but I just need to take more pit stops along the way. And that's really when it came that I realized I'm not the only one that's struggling with that issue. I think others are too, and they might give up. They might be, you know what, I don't need to do my business anyway. And I don't even know there's so many others already out there. And these typical
All
kind
the
of
things.
imposter syndromes things. And that's really when I felt like if I have the resilience to keep going, I can empower others to do that too.
I love that so much. I love the fuel tank analogy because I think it's such a tangible way to actually think about your energy and time capacity and all of those things. And I know for me, like my pattern back when was I would just go, 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 crash. Go, 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 crash. And that crash would take me out for a period of time and it would take a longer time to like rebound until I learned to take care of myself along the way. And that taking care of myself along the way was learning to know that that fuel tank is there and sort of manage it and recognize when it starts to get low and fill it before it goes to empty. And that was a game changer.
Yeah, and it sometimes you know that you're burning your candle from both sides, so that the fuel tank is pretty low already. But we just think, oh, just this one more thing. I can do it. And I know I can. And who cares about sleep and all this? And unfortunately, what happens is as you age, you also look around and you realize that a lot of your friends or family members are struggling with their health. And then all of a sudden, the alarm goes on in your head, and you're like, hold on. What I'm doing is basically, I am setting myself up to health struggles, and I need to be there for my kids. So I need to take care of myself first, and then I can take care of my children. And if I really want to inspire them to be a good entrepreneur, that goes hand in hand, the wellness and the business. I can't just push my business for the sake of my wellness. And I think that sometimes, especially as female entrepreneurs, we tend to forget about that because there's just so many different things that are on our plate that we put ourselves last.
Mm. It's so important. It reminds me of my own journey in when I started writing in my life. It was when I was a new mom and I was kind of losing my sanity. And my mission, similar to yours, was I saw my sanity slipping and I knew I wanted to be a happy mom. I wanted to model that for my kids. I felt like that was one of the greatest gifts I could give them. And that was my mission. And I think that that's so incredibly important. You said something that I wanted to circle back to. So you are a business coach and a health coach. So I feel like you just spoke to maybe where those two became one. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and this is actually a great question because earlier I talked about the fact that a lot of people say, oh, there's everything has been done already. There are so many business coaches out there. So what sets me apart is that I'm kind of marrying the business and the wellness.
Mm.
And honestly, though, even though I put that in my title, I say I'm a business and a wellness coach, one should never go without the other, right? So you should always look at your business in a way that if you really want to grow yourself, your sales, and you want to see your business thrive, that it can really only happen if it comes from a place of well-being. And same with your well-being. You can't, constantly, just buy other things like programs or tools or gadgets or whatever, because you also need to think, does it economically actually make sense? And do I really put my ideas out in a way that I can see this gives me return on investment? Because we tend to be busying ourselves and that is sometimes not exactly where you need to spend your time. So I look at it kind of like at a pretzel. I'm from Germany, so I'm like pretzels are like very much like a German thing. And so the two ends, like the business is one side and the wellness is the other side, are really intertwined in the middle. And for us, it's really important to tune into our voice and say, do I need to do more business? Do I need to do more wellness? And then really let the two go hand in hand so that there is a good, I don't like to use the word balance, maybe let's use the word harmony, and that you can actually see there are helping you and up level you together.
So, how did you learn to tune into that voice? Because that has been one of the, I feel like I've learned to lead my business intuitively, but I didn't always do that. And I didn't even know what that was. And so for somebody listening who wants that, desires that, sort of knows that's possible, but hasn't really ever done that, how would you or how do you guide your clients to find that?
Yeah, so the tuning in of the voice, I completely agree with you. It's hard because at the beginning, when you use the word self care, it just seems so overused, right?
Mhm.
And then you Google it and it's like take a bubble bath and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't like bubbles. I don't like bath. And then I don't run out of I don't have ideas even what I should do. So the goal is not really that because self-care doesn't need necessarily to be like the bubble bath, drinking champagne, reading a book formula. Self-care could be something very, very simple. So the way that I learned it was that essentially I broke down what makes me happy. And actually, that is the question that's answered in one of the most famous Harvard University courses. I think it's called like The Secret to Happiness or something like that. So there's actually a university course about this, but that's not what I teach. I teach it to my clients in a very broken down, structured way, very German and very feasible. So you need to kind of tune in with yourself. And maybe this is a brainstorm on a post it note. Maybe this is a brainstorm on a whiteboard or on your phone and figure out, all right, what fills my cup? And then you need to think about maybe there are some 5 minute activities, maybe some 15-minute activities, maybe some 30-minute activities. Going beyond that is sometimes not feasible as a mom, right? Like 1 hour activities, like, oh, no, I don't have time for this. All right. So then what you'll do is you basically need to put those things on a calendar, right? I am a firm believer that it's great to do a brainstorm, but whenever you do that, you also need to take action. So I like to create a system and I like to create goals, but the two of them need to go and actually need to be executed as well. So with all my clients, whenever I coach them at the end of the call, I always summarize what we have talked about and I say, all right, so what are the goals for our next meeting and when is our next meeting? So let's go into the calendar, schedule the meeting, and in your notes, I would like to write down I'm going to do this and this and this and this because we're all procrastinators deep down. So it's the same thing with self care. If you think, oh my gosh, I love walking, well, then you need to schedule the walks and you need to say, maybe 3 times per week, I'm going to go for little walks. Don't say I'm going to do it every day. That's bad. It sets you up for failure. But you need to look at self care as the same thing as scheduling meetings with clients or with collaborators that you actually take action and you make them happen.
I agree 100%. And I love that you sort of resist traditional idea of self care too. And maybe everybody does. Because honestly, whenever I talk about it with somebody, we all sort of are rubbed the wrong way when you think about it because it's not real. Like the way it's projected to us is not real taking care of self. And I read an article once that was called "Self Care is Discipline," and I believe that wholeheartedly. It's the discipline to sometimes make the harder choice because of a larger commitment you have, and a lot of times, well, almost every day, like I have a commitment to move my body and exercise. But do I feel like doing it every day? No. If I relied on my feelings to execute, it wouldn't happen near enough. And it's a commitment to something bigger that has me show up. And I think that's what you're talking about too.
Yeah, I use the term petite practice, French inspired. Petite means small, and practice is really what I coach my clients that always think about yourself as a learner. You're practicing, but you never aim for perfection because some days you might move your body and it's like, oh, my shoulder hurts a little bit here and there, and blah, blah, blah. But that's okay. You're still moving your body. The goal is not like to move your body and like, oh my gosh, I'm like bouncing off the walls here, you know? That's not really it. It's just to remember that that's important, that you're moving your body. And what you also need to remember is how you felt the last time when you did that. So sometimes writing down the emotions after you added a little bit of self-care helps you get started in doing that again, right? Oh yeah, I felt great when I went for that walk. Or I felt great when I called a friend and we met for coffee, which also is self-care, by the way, social interactions. So that's maybe something that helps in overcoming the initial hurdle. Well, I don't have time for this, or I wish I could, but I can't. Because you never ever regret taking care of yourself. I guarantee I never walk away from a workout and I'm like, oh, shouldn't have
Why
done
did
this
I
work.
do that? So
No.
true. So true. I like that petite practice. I think that is one of the hurdles that come up for my clients is, it's like this all or nothing. Like if I can't do it all and do it, and it doesn't look like this, then why even do it at all? And it's teaching them how to move in the gray and move in those small steps. So it's beautiful.
Oh, I
What
like that. So go
speaking
ahead.
of um clients, I'd love to hear like what are the barriers or the hurdles or the mind blocks that you see come up that get in the way of people really being able to make traction on blending a life and business that really works and allows them to thrive?
Ah, brilliant question. So I would say the number one, and I know it's been labeled imposter syndrome, is really the whole ideation, creation, and publication. To really work on a project consistently and really see it through all the way is the number one issue. And it could be that people have brilliant ideas and they write them down. And somewhere along the way, maybe something happens and then it never really gets executed. I see that all the time. And the roadblocks that could be along the way could just be, oh, I got busy. So maybe the initial idea was great, but it was just too big. So I frequently help them and break it down. Oh, instead of writing a whole book, why don't we just like a 10-page PDF? Much more feasible, right? And then we'll see how that goes. And
Petite
then
practice.
exactly, exactly. It's like the mind is so full of ideas, but sometimes we think doing a workout or writing a book needs to be this big thing. So yeah, petite practice. We're going at it in small ways because the feeling of success will propel you to do that again. It's nearly like when my children were small, they were like, more, more. That was like one of the words they used constantly. And that's how your body is going to be. You're going to like, oh, I did like that feeling of putting publish out on whatever you do, Amazon or Etsy, or I mean, you're trying to make money, so you have to go to these websites and sell something. So that's really what you have to go for. And the roadblock is really that it's frequently the clarity, the consistency, and then at the end of the day, really like, keeping at it. Also, the content is just sometimes not there. Yeah.
Would you be willing to share like what is your main challenge that you have to deal with as a woman, as an entrepreneur, to show up and, have a podcast and teach and have a business and do all the things you do? I know there's things that I bump up against almost sometimes every day. I'd love to hear, like, what is that for you and what allows you to manage that, on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I'm getting better at it. I would say that I'm recovering perfectionist, and I'm getting better at it. But I sometimes look at things that I've done, let's say 2 months ago. So, for instance, I wrote a beautiful handbook about how to start a video podcast. And I am speaking at summits that are coming up. And they asked me, oh, do you have a lead magnet? Do you have something you can share with the audience when you're speaking at the summit? So I got this handbook out that's called How to Start a Video Podcast. And as I got it out and I hadn't looked at it for 2 months, I was like, oh my gosh, I could have done a much better job. And then I started fiddling with it instead of just submitting it for the summit and saying, here's my lead magnet. And all of a sudden I was like, what in the world am I doing? I have a million other things to do. I need to actually edit a podcast episode myself. I need to do this and this and this. And here I'm working on this lead magnet, which I know, I mean, it's free and it will be just fine. Nobody's going to be like, well, you could have probably added this and that and that. So sometimes I need to remind myself that I need to keep working on the next project and not add more to my plate or make things perfect. To basically, I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm feeling like this is just gorgeous, because it's great when you look at things you did 4 or 6 months ago or even a year. It's great to notice that you could do a better job today, but is it really necessary to pick it back up and redo it? Does it help your return on investment? Most likely not. So let's just not do it, right? You just have to move on. And then that's my biggest failure, that sometimes I open Canva and I see like a million different things
Gosh.
coming up. And I'm like, oh, I could do that and that. And that's,
Oh,
and
I
stay
can
focused.
so relate. Yes. I think it's Seth Godin who talks about like shipping things, just ship it, ship it, ship it. And I have to remind myself, because I can do the same thing. I can overwork things or over prepare or over create. And I've had to learn too to like channel my creativity in different ways, because I can also follow those just spirals into like, and it's ever evolving, right? It's never really, some of these things are never done and they will be ever evolving. And kind of knowing when something is good enough and let's ship it. I can totally relate to that. But I think as entrepreneurs, there sometimes people on the outside think, oh, it looks easy, or, how do they do that? And I like to just pull back the curtain and say, for myself, I've struggled with confidence my entire life, and I have to work with my mind on a daily basis. And that's what I teach, right? Is I teach thought management. And just like you're teaching the things that we also are still learning and practicing in our own lives, right?
Yeah. And actually, what I love about the way that I approach business, and you might do the same thing, is that I actually share my struggles, and I don't hear that enough from others, right? So what I just told you about the fear of perfection, right? This like, oh my gosh, it's not perfect. I always say to my clients, fear of failure will crush more dreams than failure ever will, right?
So
So
true.
your fear to fail and this inability to get moving and pushing publish or ship on that PDF will maybe never, never publish your PDF, compared to publishing it and saying, this is good enough, because at least you put yourself out there. But the fear that you think it's not good enough, well, then it will obviously never share with the world, is very sad, right? So I tell people I struggle with this myself, and you have to kind of like share that, because sometimes people think, well, it's just me. I'm not good enough, da da da. And I'm telling them, oh, I'm going through that on a daily basis. So, yep, here we go.
This is normal. Yes.
Yeah.
And the most important part is what you do in the face of it. You know, it's not that you're going to reach some point where this just goes away. At least that's not my experience. I've been practicing this a very long time, and that negative voice in my head doesn't go away. It's gotten quieter and my relationship to it changes, right? But it's really what you do in the face of it, and we're all going to slip and fall, and the most important thing is just getting back up and getting back at it and doing that thing that's in your heart to do. So good.
I actually think that as you grow your clientele, and now I mentioned petite practices, and I have a happiness collective where I have a community where I try to have, clients work together and help each other out and empower each other out through those failures. I actually think that the failures will become more evident just because you're figuring out really like what you're doing and what you're not doing. And there will be more people that start to critique you, just like, celebrities get critiqued right and left. At that point, I think you made it. When you feel that on Instagram you put something controversial out there and you actually get some people that don't agree with you, that's great because that's healthy. You never ever want to make everybody happy. So if you put a PDF out and some people are like, well, I don't really get it, or that's not for me, awesome. You're not my client. Or maybe you send out an email and then you're noticing that some people unsubscribe. Great. They were not meant for you. So that's something that I coach my clients through, that you need to accept the fact that the more you put yourself out there, the more people will also, be drawn to you and also be pulling away from you. And that's just normal.
I think I needed to hear that today because I shared with you before we started that I'm just starting to put the podcast on YouTube, and this will might be one of the first ones. And to be honest, it's a little scary for me. And so thank you for that. It was a really good reminder. So I know one of the things that you like to talk about is really tips and strategies for how we can integrate what we've talked about today. How can our listener really just take something and really start to do that petite practice?
That sounds great. And actually ties in with a podcast episode that I'm going to publish today. And by
Ooh.
the time you listen to this, you can click on the link and then you listen to this. Where I'm sharing like a 3-part strategy of creating your wellness and business strategy, right? So I'm not going to give it all away. Otherwise, you're not going to listen to this episode right now. But I'm going to create like a little thought process in your head, because earlier we talked about the bubble bath, and that maybe we see people when you Google that have a champagne glass in their hands. What I'm going to tell you is that self-care is obviously never selfish, right? You've heard that before, but it doesn't even have to be expensive. So when I coach my clients, I always think about the fact that they come from all different kind of backgrounds. I want to make my programs accessible to them. So I always say, well, if you're going for like the coach that charges, $5,000, you do you, but that's not what I do, right? And I also think that it's an honor to work with people that trust me enough to work with me. So I also value their time. And I want to make sure that if you are in my coaching program, I'm trying to make it as economical as possible and share whatever I learned that worked for me, but I let you figure out how you can make this your own. So my strategy in that podcast episode that you're going to listen to is really creating a self-care haven at your like zero expense, so to speak. How can you do a marketing and a wellness strategy with $0? And that's what I'm going to share with you in a 3-part strategy. Gonna love it.
I love that. I can't wait to listen to, and I will make sure that we link that in the show notes so that
There's a
everyone
video.
can listen. A
So Carla,
video.
fun fact, in the video, I'm actually showing some pictures from myself. I need to do the math in my head, maybe like 30 years ago, because it shows how burned out I looked. And I talk about burnout, and I thought, what better way to show it visually? So you can listen to the podcast, but you can also watch on YouTube, and then you see how I looked 30 years ago, which wasn't exactly the vibrant, energy driven individual that you might see today.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to check that out. I have one more random question that you and I were chatting before we hit record, and you said you read about a book a day. And so I'm so curious, and my clients often, like express that they want to read more. And I have that in my own life. What does that look like, and how is that possible?
Oh, it's a book per week. A book per week.
Well, that's what I meant. That's
Oh
still a
yeah,
lot.
I read every day, so maybe that ties it all together. So, what does that look like? And I actually love this question because frequently when we think about self care, it's also, oh, read a book. And then I talk to a lot of my clients, and I am when I'm lying in bed, I'm so tired, my eyes closed, and I just can't focus on the pages. Well, welcome to the 21st century. Do you really need to buy a physical book? Nope. Right. So, if that makes it to YouTube, let me show you what I got going on here on my desk. So, I have a little Kindle, right? So, you can read on the Kindle, and this is so cute and small. You could even slide it into your purse. And when you're waiting somewhere, whether that's at the line at Costco or Trader Joe's or in a doctor's office, you could read. You don't need to look at your phone. You can read. I know you can. I know. Somebody that tells me they don't have 5 minutes to read, which is brilliant for your brain. I do not think that you don't have 5 minutes to read. That's step one. Step two, this particular Kindle, you can actually even listen to audiobooks. So you can link your AirPods or whatever you use, and then you can put it in your purse and you can listen to a book, which is what I do. So I actually put the books on my watch, and then I walk and I listen to a book. And the reason why I listen to about a book per week is because I speed it up a little bit. I guess I'm just a really high energy individual, but I go to like 1.5. If I am, if the speaker is really slow, I can even do 1.75. 2 tends to be a little bit too fast. It's like, and that's, how I get through it. But I can honestly tell you that to be a more eloquent speaker or to be a more structured thinker, the reading really helps because it builds your empathy and it builds your brain and your knowledge. And at the same time, you don't want to just talk about the weather when you go to a party, but having a conversation about the book, that's pretty profound. So I've noticed that some of the best conversations I have with people are about books.
That's beautiful. And I know when I read or listen to podcasts, it generates ideas and creativity, and I love that. You've got usually when I go out and walk or exercise, I listen to podcasts. I don't like it's not in my thinking to listen to books. Like I do that in the car, but I love that idea. That's a new option for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Tell us where can people first check out our podcast. So tell us about your podcast and then where they can find out more about what you're doing.
My podcast is called Happy Healthy Hustle, with the goal of hustling, but still staying healthy and increasing your happiness. So that's step one, Happy Healthy Hustle. And it's actually globally ranked 1.5%. So a lot of people from all over the world are tuning in and having fun with it. So be one of those and tune in. I would love that. Plus, you got to check out that episode I talked about.
Yes.
Then I'm also on YouTube, same thing, but my business is called Hello Happiness. And Hello Happiness is my business name also on media such as websites or on Instagram, hello.happy.nest. And I would love to connect with you. So just reach out.
Amazing. So be sure to check out all the great work that she's doing. Christiana, thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to checking out that episode. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you.